Deuteronomy chapter 15, the Sabbatical year. At the end of every 7 years you shall cancel all debts. You shall do this in the following manner. The creditor shall cancel any debt of his neighbor or brother, and shall stop exacting it of him, because cancellation of debts has been proclaimed in the name of the Lord. You may demand that a foreigner pay back his debts, but you shall pardon the debt of your brother. However, you shall have no poor in your midst, for the Lord shall bless you in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess. If you listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and diligently obey all that he has commanded you, which I now remind you of, he will bless you as he promised. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. You shall have dominion over many nations, but they shall not have dominion over you. If there is anybody poor among your brothers who lives in your cities in the land that the Lord is giving you, you shall not harden your heart or close your hand, but be open-handed and generously lend him all that he needs. Take care not to harbor in your heart these perverse thoughts. The 7th year, the year of cancellation of debts, is near, so you look coldly at your poor brother and lend him nothing. He may appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be found guilty. When you give anything, give it willingly with no misgivings, so that the Lord your God may bless you for this in all your work and in all that you undertake. Indeed, the poor will not disappear from the land. Therefore, I give you this commandment. You must be open-handed to your brother, to the needy, and to the poor in your land. Freeing servants. If your fellow Hebrew, a man or a woman, sells himself to you as a slave, he shall serve you for 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall give him his freedom. When you set him free, you shall not let him go empty-handed, but give him generously from your flock, from your store of wheat and wine, in proportion to the good things that the Lord has blessed you with. Remember that you too were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God has given you freedom. Because of this, I give you this commandment. But if your slave says, I do not want to leave you, because he loves you and your household, and knows that he will be well off with you, you shall then take an awl and thrust it through his ear into the door of your house, and it will serve you forever. You shall do likewise with your maidservants. You shall not consider it hard on you to give him freedom, because in these 6 years you have gained from him twice as much as you would have from a hired servant, and the Lord your God will bless you in all that you do. Firstlings. You shall consecrate to the Lord all the male firstlings that are born of your cattle or sheep. You shall not use the firstlings of your cattle for work, nor shear the firstling of your sheep. You shall eat them every year in the presence of the Lord with all your family in the place the Lord will choose. You shall not sacrifice an animal to the Lord your God if it has any defect, if it is lame or blind, but you shall eat it in your towns. The clean as well as the unclean may eat of it, as you would eat a gazelle or a deer. Only take care that you do not consume the blood, but you shall pour it out on the ground like water. Deuteronomy chapter 16, Passover. Observe the month of Abib and celebrate the Passover in honor of the Lord your God, since it was in this month that the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night. On the Passover you shall sacrifice oxen and sheep to the Lord your God, in the place he will choose as a dwelling place for his name. You shall not eat it with leavened bread, but for 7 days you shall eat it with unleavened bread, the bread of affliction, because it is in haste that you left Egypt, so that you shall remember all the days of your life on which you left Egypt. For 7 days no leaven shall be seen throughout your territory, nor shall any of the meat you sacrifice on the evening of the first day be left for the following morning. for the following morning. You may not offer the Passover sacrifice in any of the towns which the Lord your God is giving you, but only in the place that will be chosen by the Lord your God as a dwelling place for his name. Sacrifice the Passover in the evening at sunset at the time you left Egypt. You shall boil it and eat it in the place that will be chosen by the Lord your God, and in the morning you shall return to your tents. You shall eat unleavened bread for 6 days, and on the seventh you shall celebrate a sacred assembly in honor of the Lord your God, and you shall not do any work. Feast of Weeks. You shall count 7 weeks, beginning from the day you start putting the sickle to standing corn. Then you shall celebrate the Feast of Weeks for the Lord your God. Make a voluntary offering from your harvest in proportion to the way the Lord your God has blessed you. At the place that will be chosen by the Lord your God as a dwelling place for his name, you shall rejoice in the presence of the Lord your God. You, your son and your daughter, your servant, the Levite who lives in your towns, the resident alien, the orphan and the widow who live among you. Keep in mind that you were a slave in Egypt, and observe and put into practice these statutes. Feast of Tabernacles. Celebrate to the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days. After gathering the produce of your threshing floor and of your winepress, rejoice during this feast, you and your son and your daughter, your male and female slave, the Levite, the resident alien, the orphan and the widow who live in your towns. You shall celebrate the feast for 7 days in honor of the Lord your God, in the place that will be chosen by him, because the Lord will bless you in all your produce and in all the work of your hands, so that you may always rejoice. 3 times a year all your men shall present themselves before the Lord your God, in the place that will be chosen by him, on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, on the Feast of Weeks, and on the Feast of Tabernacles. You shall not present yourselves empty-handed. Each one will bring his gifts in proportion to what he has, according to the blessing that the Lord your God has bestowed upon you. Section on Leaders, Judges, and Judgments. Appoint judges and officers for your tribes in every town which the Lord gives you, that they may judge the people in all fairness. You shall not bend the law or show partiality. You shall not accept bribes, because bribes blind the eyes of the wise and subvert the cause of the righteous. Justice alone is what you must seek if you want to live and inherit the land which the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not erect a sacred pole or any wood near the altar of the Lord your God, which you will construct, and you shall not set up any sacred pillar. The Lord your God detests that. Psalm chapter 78. God's goodness and Israel's ingratitude. Give heed, O my people, to my teaching. Listen to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter mysteries of the past, which we have heard and known, which our fathers have told us. We will not keep them hidden from your children. We will announce them to the coming generation, the glorious deeds of the Lord, his might and the wonders he has done. He issued decrees for Jacob and set up a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach their children, so the next generation would learn and teach their own children. They would then put their trust in God, remembering his deeds and keeping his commands, and not be like their ancestors, stubborn and rebellious generation, whose hearts were not steadfast, whose spirits were not true to God. The Ephraimites, armed with bows, took flight on the day of battle. They did not keep God's covenant and refused to follow his law. They forgot the marvels he had done and the wonders he had shown them. He did marvels in the sight of their ancestors in the land of Egypt, in the plains of Zoan. He divided the sea and led them across. He made the waters stand like a wall. By day he led them with a cloud, and by night with a fiery light. In the desert he split rocks open to give them abundant drink. He made streams come out of a rock and caused water to flow like a river. Yet they sinned even more against him and rebelled against the Most High, testing God in the desert, demanding the food they craved. They blasphemed against God, saying, "Can God spread a table in the desert?" He made water flow out of the rock and torrents came forth. What can he also give his people bread, or can he provide meat? When the Lord heard this, he was enraged. A fire raged against Jacob. His anger fled against Israel, for they had no faith in God, nor trust in his deliverance. Yet he commanded the skies above and opened the doors of heaven. He rained down manna upon them and fed them with the heavenly grain. Mere mortals ate the bread of angels. He gave them as much food as they wanted. Then from the heavens he stirred the east wind, and by his power let loose the south wind. He rained down meat on them like dust, and birds like the sand on the seashore. He made them fall inside their camp, lying all around their tents. They ate till they were satisfied, for he gave them what they craved. But even before they were finished, while the food was still in their mouths, God's anger rose against them. He slew the strongest among them, and laid low the young men of Israel. In spite of all this, they kept on sinning and did not believe in his wonders. So he swept away their days suddenly as a storm, and their years in terror. Whenever God slew them, they repented and sought him earnestly. They remembered that God was their rock, the Most High God, their Redeemer. They flattered him with their mouths. They lied to him with their tongues. Their hearts were unfaithful. They were untrue to his covenant. Even then, in his compassion, he forgave their offenses and did not destroy them. Many a time he restrained his anger and did not fully stir up his wrath. He remembered that they were only flesh, a breeze that passes and never returns. How often did they rebel against him in the wilderness? How often did they grieve him in the desert? Again and again they tested him and provoked the Holy One of Israel. They did not remember his power in redeeming them from the oppressor, neither his marvels shown in Egypt, nor his wonders in the region of Zoan, when he turned the rivers to blood and the oppressors had nothing to drink. He swept swarms of flies that devoured them, frogs that devastated them. He gave their crops to the caterpillar and their produce to the locust. He destroyed their vines with hail and their sycamores with frost. He struck their herds with plague and their flocks with thunderbolts. He unleashed his fury against them, his wrath, indignation, and strife, a detachment of destroying angels. Giving vent to his anger, he did not spare them from death, but gave them over to the plague. He struck down Egypt's firstborn, manhood's first fruits in the tents of Ham. Then he led forth his people like a flock and guided them like sheep through the desert. He led them safely, and they did not fear, but the sea engulfed their enemies. He brought them to his holy land, to the mountain his right hand had won. He drove out peoples before them. He gave them the land as their inheritance and settled the Israelites in their tents. Yet they challenged God the Most High and rebelled against him, disobeying his decrees. They were unfaithful like their fathers, treacherous and crooked as a twisted bow. They angered him with their sanctuaries. They aroused his jealousy with their idols. When God heard this, he was enraged and utterly rejected Israel. He abandoned the tabernacle at Shiloh, the tent where he dwelt among mortals. He led his glory into captivity, his ark into the hand of the enemy. He gave his people over to the sword, so furious was he at his inheritance. Fire devoured their young men. Their maidens were deprived of wedding songs. Their priests fell by the sword, and no lament was heard from their widows. Then the Lord awoke, shouting as from sleep induced by wine. He struck his enemies on their back and put them to everlasting shame. He rejected the house of Joseph and did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but he chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which is his beloved. He built his sanctuary like the high heavens, like the earth that he founded forever. He chose David his servant and took him from the sheepfolds, from tending the sheep and their young. He brought them to shepherd Jacob his people, and Israel his inheritance. And with upright heart David pastured them, and with skillful hands he led them. Mark chapter 16, the resurrection of Jesus. When the Sabbath was over, Mary of Magdala, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices to go and anoint him. And very early in the morning on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they came to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll back the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" But as they looked up, they noticed that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right, dressed in a white robe, and they were amazed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen and is not here. See, this is the place where they laid him. Now go and tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there just as he has told you." The women went out of the tomb and fled, seized with trembling and bewilderment, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Appearance of the risen Lord. After Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary of Magdala, from whom he had driven out 7 demons. She went and told the news to his followers, who were now mourning and weeping. But when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they would not believe it. After this, he showed himself to another form to 2 of them as they were walking into the country. These men too went back and told the others, but they did not believe them. Later, Jesus showed himself to the 11 while they were at table. He reproached them for their unbelief and stubbornness in refusing to believe those who had seen him after he had risen. Then he told them, "Go out to the whole world and proclaim the good news to all creation. He who believes and is baptized will be saved. He who refuses to believe will be condemned. Signs like these will accompany those who believe. In my name they will cast out demons and speak new languages. They will pick up snakes in their hands, and if they drink anything poisonous, they will not be hurt. They will lay hands on the sick and they will be healed." So then, after speaking to them, the Lord Jesus was taken up into heaven and took his seat at the right hand of God. The 11 went forth and preached everywhere, while the Lord continually worked with them and confirmed the message by the miracles which accompanied them.